Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, well, it may or may not be available. This is for the pleasure of the eyes and the mind and the heart. We're discussing something exceptional and exceptionally rare. Reach out to me at tmosso@thewatchbox.com if you are interested, and I'll pass it up the chain of command. But today we're just going to learn about something that otherwise we may never see. This is the Sylvain Pinault Chronograph Monopoussoir. Originally debuted back in 2019, it is French watchmaker Sylvain Pinault's take on an entirely handcrafted monopusher chronograph. So let's start with the basics. This watch, when originally offered, was discussed as a titanium or rose gold timepiece. I've never seen an example in rose gold. This is the grade 5 titanium. The watch is 42 millimeters in diameter. It's 12.2 millimeters thick. From lug tip to lug tip, it's fairly broad at 52 millimeters, though I have to remind you that the actual pivot points of the strap are inboard of the end of the lugs, so the fit on the wrist is going to be smaller than 52 millimeters across. We'll do a quick wrist shot here. I can't overemphasize that the watch really is not that large. The case shape and style creates the impression of something like a Manufacture Royale or perhaps something along the lines of a Louis Moinet, when the reality is anything but. This is a very wearable watch, even on a 16 centimeter circumference wrist. You can see how flat it is. It would easily slide underneath my cuff. There's really no issue there. Being all sapphire and grade 5 titanium, it's super light on the wrist, and grade 5 tie has a lot of advantages. First, it's hypoallergenic, so if you've got nickel allergies, this is a great choice. Second, it is both lighter and harder, and therefore more scratch resistant than standard 316 steel. Taking a look at the strap, you'll appreciate that this is a custom cut. Almost everything about this watch is full custom, right down to the strap, which is factory. And you can see calfskin on the bottom, a medium rectangular scale alligator in matte black on the top. It has a broad folded edge and a monotone stitch. It is fixed to the case using hinge lugs, themselves locked in place using screws and bars. It is a matching and beautifully formed titanium pin buckle. You can see that the contour matches the profile of the lugs, and it includes both satination and polish. The case, when viewed from the side, actually has a large sapphire cylinder that encircles the movement, so you can see it in profile, including the drivetrain, an unusual pleasure. Individual columns, like an old marine chronometer, lift the bezel structure above the case. The case is satinated for the most part with a fluid form that includes both creases and curves, and you can see that there's a transitional bevel from the hood of the case to the flank, and that bevel runs all the way around. The same treatment is mirrored on the bezel itself. We have a vintage-inspired unbranded crown with a coaxial mono pusher, so you operate this watch with its single stop, reset, restart trigger. Now what you're looking at here is a dial that, like the watch itself, is layered. Sylvain Pinault uses the basic Unitas ETA 6497 movement as the underlying train architecture, but no actual parts are carried over from the ETA. He's just using the geometry of the drivetrain and then the escapement. Everything else, 98 individual parts fabricated by the man without CNC, electrospark erosion, Leica, or DRIE. This is a truly handcrafted watch that required an entire year of work to fabricate. Now, taking a look, you can see that Pinault, who has been a watchmaker since 1998, actually worked for a lot of other brands and refined his taste in design. So you could see evidence of his experience with restoration. He then worked at Franck Muller and Karl F. Bucherer, and just recently has he started making watches under his own name. Everything on the dial is handcrafted, starting with a track outboard that can be used for reading seconds and fractions of seconds. We have constant seconds, that is running seconds, over just below 9 o'clock. Let's call it 8:20. Then we have a 45-minute semi-instantaneous jumping minute register just below 3 o'clock. Let's call it 340. We have the hands up at the top on top of a sunburst black base with the name of the model and the maker. Screws on the dial side are all black polished, but you note so are all the elements of the chronograph. And the chronograph here is an invert chronograph, so you could see that the column wheel, the bridge for the column wheel, the lateral clutch, the levers, the horns, and the hammers, it's all on the dial side, bringing the most exciting parts of the watch to the fore, so you don't need to flip it to view it through a display case back. Now you can see that there are media blasted bridges that form the base for the individual registers as well as the time, and that has been black polished along its edge in a bevel that creates sharp inward angles here and here. There's media blasting across the top, mirrored beveling on the side, and then those two interior angles. You could see there is more mirror beveling on the parts of the watch that are made of steel, all of which have been black polished on their top and mirror beveled on their side. Look carefully, particularly on the lateral clutch, and you could see that there's actually an inward bevel formed by the junction of two bevels on steel. Not easy to do. You also appreciate the delicacy of the springs that have been finished here for the pleasure of the eye, but still remain functional. I should also mention that the action of the chronograph is the stuff of dreams in terms of how it feels and how it sounds. I turn it all over. There's not a whole lot to see here. You can see this is piece number 1. I'm going to say that this watch is either unique or one of just a few. I know I've seen another dial configuration. Now, that might have been this watch with a previous dial, or it might have been another example. So whether this watch is one of a kind, one of two, or one of just a few, it is exceptionally rare. Flipping it over, you could see some of the pieces that Pinault made himself, including an enormous free-sprung balance on a black polished and internally beveled steel balance cock. Now, the balance here is absolutely enormous. It's a manual wind movement with a 2.5 hertz beat rate. The balance is free-sprung and adjusted in 6 positions. It has a 45-hour power reserve, and you can see the array of color here. We have lovely media-blasted blued bridges. We have the bright silver mirrored balance cock. We have the fired blue center that holds the shock protection system, the gold of the train wheels as well as the balance, and then the gray of the dial base below. A very special watch. You can see a separate little bridge has been satinated, and we have a satinated anchor and escape wheel, and then all of this is water resistant in theory down to 30 meters, but I wouldn't test the theory. This is an unbelievable piece from a watchmaker who's going places. More recently, he has won the Horological Revelation Prize with his new Origine timepiece at the GPHG in 2022. And this watch is itself an award winner. It won the 26 Un des meilleurs ouvriers de France, which is basically the Best Craftsman in France award given out to artisans in different professional categories, and he was the only winner among watch and clock makers. So this is already an award-winning watch, and its maker has gone on to GPHG honors. He's a watchmaker going places, and this is an example of some of his earliest work under his own name, making it profoundly interesting. A French watchmaker working in Sainte-Croix, Switzerland, already a second-generation watchmaker starting a new tradition. This is Sylvain Pinault and his original chronograph Monopoussoir.